Okay, so it's 12:30. I'm going to start the session. I'm sure more people will join us as we go on. And I would like to welcome you all to our session today. This is going to be a really interesting and exciting session this afternoon. Can I just remind you to switch your microphones off and also your cameras? The session is being recorded today, and the recording will be available probably from next week on the Scottish Learning Festival website. So it will be something that you can share with colleagues as well if they haven't been able to come to the session. If you're tweeting about the session, then the hashtag is SLF online, and that helps us to follow where we are going, follow the conversation online as well. So I am very delighted to welcome today Michelle Matthews and Leanne Sweaton, who are from the South East Improvement Collaborative. The South East Improvement Collaborative has a really exciting part of its plan, which is called the Empowered System. And this is where the plan is encouraging practitioners to connect and link and collaborate with each other. And we're going to be sharing today a bit about the Pedagogy Pioneers aspect of the Empowered System. And in particular, Leanne's going to be sharing her journey with play pedagogy. So Michelle Matthews is a quality improvement officer. She's based in the Scottish Borders, but she is linked with the South East Improvement Collaborative, and she has been with the South East Improvement Collaborative now for a couple of years. And Leanne Sweaton is from Aberdour Primary School, and Leanne's work was noticed in an HMIE inspection which took place before lockdown when she was teaching in Primary 1. And her work was particularly noticed for being a very good example of play pedagogy in Primary 1. So we have got a really interesting and exciting session today. There may be some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to use the chat box as we go along. And I'm now going to pass on to Michelle.
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. And I can see lots of practitioners here and appreciate you're probably here in your dinner time. So thank you so much for that. So as Katrina said, I'm a QIO with the South East Improvement Collaborative, or SEIC as we refer to it. And one of the ways we structure our regional improvement underpins our vision and values. And we work collectively as local authorities, sharing, collaborating and supporting responsive planning. And our driver is local improvement through regional collaboration. And through this collaboration, the 5 local authorities work together to implement the SEIC plan and ensure full representation from practitioners at all levels. And our vision is underpinned by the development of what Katrina referred to before as the empowered system. And this is a self-sustaining system which has been developed over the past few years. It's built the capacity of school communities and educational settings, and it's enabled much more collaborative ways of working. So the planned programme of work aims to continue to accelerate improved outcomes for children and young people. And as you'll see on the next slide, we've got a diagram of the empowered system, and this focuses on the need to build effective opportunities for our practitioners at all levels of the system and across all the authorities. Our collaborative focus is to work together, share practice, try out new approaches, engage with educational research as real drivers for improvement. And we've achieved this, or we're working to achieve this, through 5 programmes of the empowered system. 3 of them are already established. That's the SEIC Associates, our research schools and Pedagogy Pioneers, which we'll come on to in a minute. And we've got 2 just in their infancy, which are improvement through partnerships and learning schools. So as the vision for the empowered system is about working with peers, it's attracted some outstanding practitioners who embed our shared vision of working together, empowering all, improving outcomes in their work, and who have a real passion for excellence, equity and empowerment, building strong and sustainable supports. And this has been particularly evidenced in our first cohort of Pedagogy Pioneers, which we ran through a virtual platform, not the way that we'd planned it originally, but COVID hit and that was the way we did it. And that ran from March to June this year. It's been really well attended, not only by people in the South East Improvement Collaborative, but wider RICS as well. So to focus on the pedagogy
Michelle, we've lost your sound.
So getting onto the Pedagogy Pioneer programme itself, the Pedagogy Pioneers are people who have shown excellence and innovation in their practice of learning, teaching and assessment in a variety of curriculum areas and contexts. The pioneers are identified by their own local authorities. They're acknowledged for using and developing emerging practice, informed by their own professional reading, research and inquiry, and have a real deep professional understanding of this pedagogy, which they are prepared to share beyond their setting, across their local authority and across the Regional Improvement Collaborative. And by creating this credible quality assured group of practitioners who work with children from birth to 18 years old across all sectors, the pioneers create a peer support resource at local and regional level, and collectively this will improve the quality of learning across our improvement collaborative. So the work of the Pedagogy Pioneers supports the improvement of teacher efficacy, where practitioners can link through collaborative practice. And this allows the improvement of their own reflective practice. It's linked to professional learning, relevant reading, inquiry and research. And our pioneers have a clear understanding of the importance of data and how we use that data to drive improvements. So as I said earlier, the pioneers have led virtual twilight sessions, just one-off sessions on their specialist area. And the sessions gave an input into the research that they'd used that supported their approach. It signposted professional reading that had helped them, and then they talked about how they specifically had implemented changes into their classroom to deliver this improved approach. And many pioneers were also very honest about their journey. You know, we all set up these learning journeys and they don't always go the way that we planned. So they were very honest about that. They talked about how they brought these implementations into their classroom, and then about the impact that they'd had on the learners, on the positive outcomes that they had. And during the sessions, through the use of the chat function or hands up, people had the chance to ask questions, to reflect on their thinking and to deepen their understanding. And then at the end of the session, we had time built in for questions and answers. But what we also found happened was that the attendees coming, as well as the Pedagogy Pioneers, started to share resources and highlight good professional reading. So the sessions created a great opportunity to network out with your own authority as well. The sessions had been pre-recorded, so we made these available after the session through the SEIC Collab website and also through our Pedagogy Pioneer Glow team. And in doing this, and we'll continue to do it, we're aiming to build up a sustainable professional learning platform for all our practitioners in all of our settings and schools. So the feedback from the sessions has been very positive from both the Pedagogy Pioneers themselves and attendees. So as the programme moves into the second year, it's essential that it evolves to meet the needs of all of our practitioners. So from the feedback that we've had through the evaluations that we give out at the end of each of the sessions, we've decided that this year we're going to continue to offer a series of one-off events like we did last year that will run virtually, because that's a way that in our improvement collaborative we can offer something to every practitioner no matter what level they're working within the system. And that could be childminders, because we're looking at developing this through our early years network. There'll be sessions open to childminders, private providers, as well as staff within school settings. We're also looking, again, because feedback highlighted an appetite for this, to offer sessions specifically around inclusion and additional support needs. But where we've had the greatest appetite was for play pedagogy, and we had huge uptake on the sessions we've offered last year. So this year we're looking to build on that and offer what we'll call a sprint and support session that will be run across the whole school year, and people who are kind of in the infancy of bringing play pedagogy into their classroom will be able to sign up for them. They'll come to all of the sessions, there'll be signposting to professional reading, there'll be a bit of input, they'll go back into their classrooms, they'll try to implement things, come back, have some professional discussion, and they'll also have one-to-one support with a mentor or a coach. And these will be the people that delivered the play pedagogy sessions in our cohort 1. and they'll work with them. There'll be opportunities to have that real one-to-one support through using virtual platforms to share learning environments, to have a look at the things that they've put in place and really assess the impact that they've had on pedagogical change and improvement. So that leads me to hand over to Leanne, because she is one of our brilliant pedagogy pioneers from the first cohort, who's also agreed to work with us this year and take forward the sprint and support sessions. So I'll hand over to you, Leanne.
Thank you. I am still here. I'm just trying to share my screen.
I can see that, Leanne.
Great, fantastic. Okay, I am absolutely delighted to be asked along by both the Scottish Learning Festival and the South East Improvement Collaborative Pedagogy Pioneer Programme to speak to you all today, mainly because I love to talk. Michelle and Katrina will tell you that, but especially because I love to talk about play and how much it's impacted on my practice over the last 4.5 years. To put things into context, I've been a class teacher for over 20 years. It still scares me saying that. And in that time, I've taught across 3 different schools and in every stage from primary 1 to 7. Back in August 2017, I was given the opportunity to go back into primary 1 and have since spent the last 4 years there, but I'm now currently the primary 2 class teacher. When I first started, I knew there was an appetite for play, as the previous class teacher's parting words were to me. So the children need to play more. That flagged up lots of questions for me, as I was under the impression that children did play already. And, what did that mean? Who said that? Why have they to play more? And so on. And my journey of discovery with play and how powerful it was had begun. I read everything and anything I could, joined lots of social media pages, and I began to follow anyone that was an advocate for play. So each year I built on my practice, and I constantly evolved and changed the way I delivered my teaching, learning and assessment through play. Then in February of 2020, which, amid COVID seems like a lifetime ago now, the school was inspected. My head teacher at the time assured me that they would love the approach, but I was a little bit anxious about what they would think and if they believed in what I was trying to do. Because at that time, obviously, everybody was very early into their play journeys or hadn't even started them. But thankfully, they loved it. They loved my passion for play, but most importantly, they enjoyed seeing the children in action, because I assure you it is mesmerising. I was given my own little section then on the report of practice worth sharing, which I am still really proud of. That recognition kind of thrust me into the stratosphere, and even now I get a little bit imposter syndrome sitting even talking to you today, as each time somebody asks me to talk about my play practice. In no way am I perfect. I don't have all the answers, as every class, school and setting are unique, but what I do have is a passion for play and a belief that it is the best way for children to learn. Last session then, I was put forward by Fife Council to join the Pedagogy Pioneer programme with SEIC. It's been a fantastic experience, as lots of people from different authorities wanted to hear what I had to say about play. It set out to do what it was supposed to do. It definitely empowered me, and to believe that I was doing practice worth sharing. So I'd like to now talk to you about how it all works for me on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to start with this quote from Realising the Ambition Be Me, and I'd like to focus your attention on these 3 words: spaces, experiences and interactions. I think this best sums up how to approach creating a space that promotes play, independence and high quality learning, teaching and assessment for children. And although this was published 2 years into my play journey, these 3 words really helped to focus my attention on what I was trying to achieve. So when thinking about your own classrooms and play journeys, it's not about having the best resources or the biggest classrooms, but more about being creative with the space that you do have. Think carefully about each space and what experience you hope the children to have in there, and ultimately what interactions the children may have to help them develop as a learner. For example, my home corner is a space in the centre of my room, giving the children a 360 view of everything. It's the heart of my classroom, just like the kitchen is the heart of the home. where children can experiment and experience home comforts, where they can sit with others and talk, where they can take on different roles or be themselves, and where they can regulate their emotions in familiar surroundings. Last session, I was asked to join Fife's PPP team, and that stands for Promoting Playful Pedagogy, giving me the chance to support other class teachers with their play journeys. I have had the opportunity to co-create training, support and advice so that the children across Fife experience high quality learning, teaching and assessment through play in the early years of the primary school. In reference to my previous slide about spaces, experiences and interactions, here in Fife we promote the idea of learning zones, spaces that allow for creativity like writing resources, art, junk modelling, spaces that allow for discovery and experiential learning like construction, loose parts, sand, water, science, and social spaces like a book area and a home corner. In all these spaces we weave literacy, numeracy, health and wellbeing and IDL. And to get the best out of these zones or spaces, I use a cycle of responsive planning and use large parts of my day to observe children interacting in the spaces that I provide. I record my observations to document the learning that's taken place, but the observations also help me to decide what changes, if any, need to be made to challenge or extend the learning further. So here is just some of the things that I have on offer in my primary 2 classroom this year. Spaces that I use to help develop and extend the children's creativity skills. Greg Bottrell has some excellent reading around message centres, but in essence, it's a space in the room with lots of different stationery and writing materials which children can transport to promote writing all around the room. I would say that, it's really important when you're creating a message centre or the likes of writing resources, try not to stick it next to a table, because what children will end up doing is just writing at that table. So if it's not beside a table, children will just go there and transport whatever they need to other areas. The children love junk modelling. It's one space that is a permanent feature in my room. Not only does it promote creativity, but there is so much problem solving that goes on there too. And this year in primary 2, I've noticed that the children work more together when creating models from junk as opposed to last year in primary 1. So you can only imagine what the likes of a primary 7 cohort of children could do if we had this on offer further up the school. A loose parts trolley is another permanent space in my room. The possibilities are endless as the children take the loose parts all around the room, including for food in the home corner, adding to their models in the blocks, or creating small world structures in the sand. Loose parts is by far my favourite resource as it's so open-ended. Finally, painting. Children love to paint. And I remember previous to this play journey, paints was something that I got out when we had something to do in art. It was never a permanent feature in the room. And I urge anybody who hasn't got it as a permanent feature to get it out. It's just wonderful. Children find it really calming and soothing to paint and to create pictures. It's really good for their fine motor skills as well. Creativity juices just flow better when the children have, a chance to mix the paint themselves. So try also just to provide the 3 primary colours with different paintbrushes and then just stand back and see how creative they can be. So my classroom will always have blocks as part of my discovery learning. And I read somewhere once, and I've actually spoken to Katrina Gill about this, that most or if not all of the early level curriculum can actually be taught through block play. I remember reading that and being absolutely blown away, but I absolutely agree. All the children in my room use the blocks and the experience is enhanced with the loose parts, which I often have side by side. The boys in this picture had recreated a building from Minecraft. For those of you who don't have children, it's an online computer game. And if I had witnessed this prior to my play journey, I most likely would have dismissed it because the boys weren't necessarily doing anything new, but rather recreating. However, I now understand they were motivated and they were fully engaged with something that interested them. And it was fascinating to hear them share this experience with me and with each other. The problem solving, the communication and the discovery of what can be achieved with the blocks was just a joy to watch. They were so proud of this structure. We uploaded it onto their Seesaw so that they could share it with their parents too. And around the slide, you can see just how many things were covered in this one experience. And yet the next day, those boys returned to build something completely different. Finally, just an example of the social zones of my room. This is Cupcake Munch. It's a cafe that these children had created in one of the social spaces in the room. They used loose parts play to create the many different cupcakes they'd made. And then I used this child-led learning to then support the girls in creating their very own company called Cupcake Munch. This cafe was then created in a different part of the room because it's important to note that role play areas should be separate from the home corner, as this is an important space that should never be changed. So the girls collected and organised all the things they needed to make it successful, and it ran as a play experience in the room for a good few weeks. They then involved other children, and we made signs, menus and a price list. We had a chef, we had waiters and waitresses and customers. We explored and used money, and we became extremely creative in our cupcake inventions with the loose parts. Child-initiated learning, challenged and extended by the class teacher and the children, and then facilitated with responsive and intentional planning. It hit experiences and outcomes in a huge list of subjects for not just these children, but for the entire class over the time that the experience ran for. Now you might be thinking, how can we cover the things we need to teach? What can be taught through play and what can't? How do you track and monitor progress? The answer is, or the answer for me certainly was, you need to upskill yourself in observing children in play, being able to question the children in play and assessing them in play, so that and then having really robust recording methods which give you the data that you need to justify why play is working well and is the best thing for your learners. Above is a list of the many different roles the class teacher needs to be able to do in any given day, and realising the ambition reminds us just how important our role is. This leads me back to my earlier point about classroom setup. Spaces and experiences are important, but the interactions between the children and adults is crucial in assessing, challenging and extending the learning for the children. So how do I do it? Daily, my children will play for large parts of the day. I use this observation sheet to record who and what I see. I may at times use on-the-spot teaching and challenge and extend the learning as it is happening. However, I might also use some intentional planning and respond with teaching activities and/or resources later that day or the next. I track who I've observed and sometimes focus on my attention on children I may not have noticed for a few days. I also track the experiences and outcomes that either the class or individual children might have achieved. I use these observations then to make judgments on the children's progress and to plan next steps, either for the classroom spaces or for what I like to call a top task, which would be a teacher-directed learning activity, or for individuals as well. After each play session, the children and I have what we like to call a plenary of play. And the children came up with that idea, not me. A plenary of play, where children share with each other what they've been learning during their free play time. These discussions also give me really vital information on the level that children are able to articulate just what they have achieved. And on this slide, I've just tried to pull together a list of the impact that play-based learning has had on both me and the children, but I'm sure I haven't covered everything. In my opinion, play-based learning leads to high quality learning, teaching and assessment because we are taking our lead from the children. When they lead, their motivation and engagement is off the scale, and therefore more learning outcomes are achieved as a result. Better still, I've become more knowledgeable in how children learn and develop, and now plan and deliver learning that children always want to take part in. I have also become skilled in observing children in play, questioning them and meeting more learners' needs when I teach in the moment. My children are empowered, and that's what empowers me. In conclusion, environment means the spaces, experiences, and interactions children feeling empowered to lead learning, and the skilled class teacher to observe, challenge and extend the interests of the children to provide high quality learning, teaching and assessment. Thank you. And that's gone by and a whistle stop.
It absolutely has, Leanne. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, you know, we could listen to you talking about your practice for much longer than we have, and we still have some time left. So I wonder whether there might be some questions that people would like to ask in the chat that I could put to Michelle and Leanne. Everyone's saying it's heartwarming, great session, lots of practical information. Somebody asked about the observation format. Do you have a particular format that you use to record observations?
Yeah, so the one that I had shared up on the screen is something that I just created myself. I actually I got the idea certainly from my nursery colleagues who I spent a lot of time with in the initial stages of my play journey, and I am still at their door a lot, asking them. They're a great support in helping you to think about your spaces and give you like top tips about what works well. But yeah, the observation sheet is just something I made myself. As it's evolved, I've learned that I used to try and write up the observations as soon as they happened or whilst I was in them. And I found that obviously that kind of detracted from what I was trying to do with the children at that particular time. So what I do now, and I actually got it again from my nursery colleagues, I have a wee post-it and I just write down maybe some keywords. So the children that I saw, where they were, and maybe just some keywords to remind me. And then at the end of the day, I would write up that observation. And then in one of the columns, I then match that observation against an experience or an outcome or a benchmark. And then that goes onto a central tracker that we have in my planning folder.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that probably answers somebody else's question, which was about what kind of data you collect.
Yeah.
Quite a wide range.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Katrina, I also collect data around who I'm observing. I think that's really important. And then I think what happens is you get children who show you really high quality play because they're confident learners and they're outgoing, and and then you get other children who have really high quality play that you don't necessarily notice all the time because they're a bit more quieter. They only play in particular spaces or keep themselves to themselves. So I do also track who I observe. So not only what I observe, but who I observe, and I put that onto a tracker as well. So if I get to the end of the week and I think to myself, oh, I haven't seen such and such, then I'll make sure that I make time for that the next day to observe them and see what they're up to. I also, maybe decide to observe a particular area, 1 week. If I think that not many children are really interacting in that space or that area, I would take the opportunity then to just observe that one area and see what's happening so that I can respond and change that. And I speak to the children regularly about what it is they're enjoying and what they would like to see changed.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got a question about additional support needs. Do you have many children with additional support needs?
So we're very fortunate, obviously, we're not in Aberdour. However, what we have found, I do have 2 or 3 children with additional support needs, and I have done in the past. And what we have found is this particular approach, play, has really supported them in, in their progress, in their social skills. We haven't seen it being detrimental anyway, that's for sure. If anything, I've got a little boy in my class this year who still really struggles socially. And I think in a traditional classroom, bums on seats at tables and chairs, he wouldn't get to build up his social skills as much as he is getting to do when he's out, in the spaces that are provided.
Fantastic, and I think that's I think when play's working well, you're right, it really does support children.
Absolutely.
It's about starting from the child and where each individual child is. So thank you for that. We've got a question about sharing photographs of your classroom and how you use the space. And actually in response to that, maybe I'm going to suggest having a look on the SEIC Collaborative website in the Pedagogy Pioneers section, because your presentation is on there and it's got more pictures on it. There, so that might be a useful place to go and look. We've got another question asking about whether are you the only adult in the room? How do you focus your attention and step away from supervising?
Okay. Yes, I am the only adult in the room, and I think to begin with, when I first started in my play journey, obviously the children are coming from the nursery setting where we have 6 EYOs, 5 or 6 EYOs, to a classroom setting where there's just me. And it's all in the training. I think you need to remember that the children in the nursery are highly confident and highly independent, and independence is key. So when the children come into the classroom, it's very important that all the resources are accessible for them. They shouldn't need to ask you where to get something. It should be out and ready for them to pick up and use. But equally, there's training to go on, and it does take much of the first term to train the children in your expectations of how we conduct ourselves in the spaces, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what the classroom should look like, you know, during play, and what the classroom should look like at the end of a play session. And it's just reinforcing those messages all the time. I actually think you actually get a better, what's the word I'm trying to think of, a better chance to diffuse conflict quicker. And then that, and again, that's a learning experience, isn't it? The children are in a play environment. They have to learn how to share the resources. They have to learn to listen to one another. So if there are conflicts, then it's part of the learning experience. So if you're using restorative practice and restorative approaches in your conversations in the children, I would take that as a learning experience for the children and just remind them, you know, this is how Mrs. Sweaton expects you to, you know, conduct yourself in this particular space, and about how it's not safe. We talk a lot about the safety in the classroom. Certainly, I just wanted to say one top tip. I used to, at the beginning, I used to do a play session, then we'd tidy up, and then another play session, then we'd tidy up, and then I don't do that anymore. I only tidy before we go for lunch and at the end of the day, and we only tidy to make the classroom safe. So we only pick up things that perhaps we're going to trip over or we're going to damage, and we push chairs and things on, and obviously put the lids back on pens and glue sticks and things. But it's really important not to continually get children to tidy up, because they like to go back to that piece of play or that learning that they were doing before break. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
No, I think you've given people lots of food for thought there. I mean, one thing that struck me in what you were talking about with the children, you talked about how they uploaded their own work to Seesaw, and you know, I just, gosh, they've got, you know, so much autonomy in that space. They're not having to come and ask you, what should I do, where should I put it, and then that frees you up to give you that time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody has asked about what points in the day do you have free play?
Most of the day. So definitely when the children come in first thing in the morning, I find that really settling, and it makes the children feel really secure, and it really just starts them off for the day. I find then they get a full hour in the first part of the morning. So from 9 till 10, the children will be what I call, or what the children call, free learning. I coined the phrase free learning, and you're welcome to pinch it, because I really want the children to understand the value that, yes, we are playing, but we are learning. And when we are free learning, we are getting to choose what we are doing, who we are with, and how that is going. And then about 10 o'clock, we have maybe 15 minutes before we go out for break, and I perhaps gather the children then, and then conduct what we'd like to call a teacher-directed learning opportunity, or a teacher-directed learning activity, where I would maybe teach something like phonics, or we'd maybe do our story of the week or something like that. Then they would go out for play into the playground, and then because they've had that another break to really get moving and be active, when they come back in, then I would start the next session to begin with a teacher-directed activity for maybe the first 10-15 minutes, no longer than that, and certainly no longer than 5-10 minutes in the initial stages of primary one. We would build it up to maybe 15 minutes at a time, and then the children would go off again and have another hour before lunch. And then again, I would our lunch times are slightly longer here at Aberdour at the moment, because we've got split lunches and things and split breaks because of COVID restrictions. So in the afternoon, we've got a full 2 hours. So I might start with a bit of teacher-directed activity first, free learning, and then have a break in the middle for another bit of teacher-directed activity, and then another block of play. So in essence, the children do play for a large part of my day.
And that makes a lot of sense in terms of, you know, the sort of tidying up, because if you're kind of, it sounds like you're flowing in and out of
Yeah,
those
flowing
different
in and out of
options.
play, yeah.
Yeah.
I did see a question, if I could just jump on, I did see a question about somebody asking, what do you do while the children are playing? I think for the first part of the morning, I make myself available for that whole hour where I can go around and observe and interact and do on-the-spot teaching and things like that. In the second hour, I would maybe dedicate maybe half an hour to observing and half an hour to what I like to call a top task, and the children are familiar with a top task. It's something that they have to come and do at a table with me, and it's where I can gather some assessment data, or I can do some on-the-spot teaching with a particular group of children. Again, in the afternoon, I would do a mixture of observing and top tasks.
Fantastic. I'm noticing somebody asking for reading to recommend, and I'm just going to jump in and say I absolutely recommend Realising the Ambition. And Becca, you've said from a family learning point of view, and I think Realising the Ambition is really helpful for families and parents as well as for practitioners. So I think that's a great starting point, you know, and Leanne touched on some of the kind of ways of thinking and the language that we use in Realising the Ambition. Right, there's lots and lots of messages here. I know
Thank you so much for everybody's comments. They're so lovely.
There's been a few asking about extra pair of hands and an extra adult, and you've already talked about really pretty much being on your own. There's a question here about, do you have many children who have not been to nursery or who have little experience of play who need support to join in?
Absolutely. I would say that most children have had an experience of an early years setting, either nursery or playgroup or a mother and toddlers or something like that. But yeah, this was a real eye opener for me, and it is every year that I continue my play journey. There are some children that actually need to be taught how to play. Although we would argue that it's intrinsically motivating for children, and it is, there are some children with who lack social skills, and that impacts on how they interact and enjoy a play experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely, it does. Yeah. There's one here about thoughts on full free play versus play rotations. I'm not entirely sure what is meant by play rotations, but I think what I would say is that when something is directed by the adult, then it's not
truly play. Yeah, I was going to say, I think play rotations, people are talking about carousels in some form. I think when I follow social media pages, and I try not to say too much because I don't want to be that person saying, you shouldn't be doing that. But play in essence is free. It's freely chosen, freely intrinsically and motivated by the children. It's something they choose to do. You can have elements of your teacher directed activities with a playful nature, but if you're setting something up and asking children to do a particular thing with that, then that is not play. That is what we would call a teacher directed activity. And I see it all the time on social media pages where, you know, people set up these lovely tough tray activities, which just bamboozles me because I've done that before earlier on in my play journey. The children will come over, but they'll never do what you want them to do. Also, I see people with these lovely signs, you know, come and make a model, come and do this, come and do that. Children in primary one, I don't know, I mean, in Aberdour, we do have very able children, but they can't read these signs. What you're better doing is having your play as open-ended as possible. I do put out what's called provocations. So if I've observed something, say, for example, in the sand, and I think there's a piece of learning come out of that, I might put some provocations beside that sand, some resources and things but again, I'm not saying to the children, you must do this with it, but it tends to be that they will extend the learning further with whatever resources or provocation you've put out. So yeah, absolutely not direct, and not having children moving round stations where the activity is playful. That is not in the essence what play is.
And I think probably sometimes there are times where there might be times it's about knowing the difference between what is a teacher directed or teacher initiated task and that.
Yes. Thank you. Initiated. I've been trying to think of that word for ages.
I've got an interesting question here about the difference between primary 1 and primary 2. So Anna says, you mentioned a wee bit about noticing the difference in how children play from primary 1 to primary 2. Have you needed to make any other changes to your teaching environment to support? Just asking because I found the same and would be interested to know how you take on play with learners meeting targets within the first level curriculum.
For me, this is the first time actually in 20 years that I've actually had the opportunity to take a class on, would you believe? And it was really I would have stayed in primary one, but I really wanted to move the approach further up the school. And we have got sand all the way up to primary 7 now at the moment, and we've just ordered blocks for everybody as well. So it's very exciting. So yeah, I think the approach is still the same, the cycle of responsive planning, top tasks, that sort of thing. Obviously, you're in the first level, so um, again, it's all about the observations that I make. So what I observed and responded to in primary one were not necessarily what I'm now observing and responding to in primary two, because obviously the children are more advanced in their learning and their progress and things. But this is the essence of this play-based approach, is that it suits the children who have come and made that progress, but it also suits the children who have yet to make that progress and are still very much in, say the early level. I would say that the spaces and the experiences that the children have in my room are similar to primary one, because I know those spaces and those experiences work really well with children. Hence the reason why we're trying to get blocks, for example, all the way up the school. It's an open-ended resource. Why would you not have blocks? And what children could do in primary 7 will not be what children could perhaps do with the blocks in primary 2. So I would say certainly the approach is exactly the same, but I think it's just how you respond to what you're observing and what you can see, and how that fits well with the first level. So I'll give you an example. So perhaps we're doing measurement at the moment, and that came from the fact that the children want to know all the different heights, because I had a height chart I'd put up in the classroom. Of course, it immediately caused a lot of interest. Oh, what height is such and such? And so we measured everybody so we could see who was the tallest, who was the smallest. So that would be fine for the early level where you're using, non-standard units and things. Whereas now, because I'm in primary 2, I extended that and took that one step further. So I got out measuring tapes and rulers and things, and we started talking a wee bit about centimetres and metres, and how we can use that standard unit then to measure things, rather than using just cubes or pencils like we had done in the early level. That's kind of an example of how you just extend it. But in essence, what you find now is, I had measuring tapes in primary 1, but they didn't know how to use them necessarily. Maybe some of them did, whereas now I've used it as a whole class teaching point of coming from what I've observed, and the children are now going round the room and measuring things. And then, of course, that gives you the opportunity to show them how to measure things accurately and start at the zero and, oh, how many centimetres is that? And just embed the language all the time. I don't know if that's answered the question. I go off on tangents all the time.
No, I think that's a lovely example, Leanne, of actually how teaching that skill then enables the children to deepen their play, extend their play, and take their play further. And and I think that's the thing, that we really have to think all the time about that balance. It's not one or the other, and that the teaching part is about children those new skills and developing their thinking.
And using play to teach it as much as possible. Because that's when children remember it. That's the other thing I've noticed. Children remember things they do in play. They don't remember things that I do as a top task sometimes, but they will remember it when they do it in play.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of minutes left, and lots of lovely comments.
I know. Thank you so much, everybody. It's so nice.
I think this has been a very inspiring presentation from both you, Michelle. I think the work of Pedagogy Pioneers, and obviously we were showcasing play in primary 1, but the work goes across right through to secondary education. So it's a really inspiring part of the South East Improvement Collaborative Plan. And I think, Leanne, you'll have lots of people wanting to get in touch with you. There are definitely groups in Facebook, Twitter that people can follow. I noticed somebody mentioning in terms of reading, Julie Fisher's interacting or interfering. I think also Julie Fisher's starting from the child is really helpful in terms of thinking about, particularly as we take it on into primary school. I'm noticing one of the final comments, one of the best presentations I've attended in a long time, Leanne's passion.
Thank you so much. That's so kind.
Really does.
And I'm glad that my passion comes through, because I'm hugely passionate, and if I can, inspire other people to go on this journey. And I read something further up the chat there, people are a bit scared to use the word play, don't be scared to use it. If you look at all the research, and I ended up looking at research from over 100 years ago, this is nothing new. It is nothing new. Play is the way that children learn best. So why are we not using it to our advantage in education?
Absolutely. And I think, as you said, you know, with that, it's that take that step, give it a go, develop it. It's a journey. You're
It is
never
a journey.
start
Definitely.
at the first, you know, time you try it, you'll adapt and change, and each different cohort of children will be different.
Absolutely.
It's really just about letting the children, you know, take the lead, and because the children will show us the way. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's now 1:15. It's time for us to end. So thank you both so much. And I really do think that from the comments in the chat, this has been a very inspiring and helpful session for people. So thank you. I'll give you a clap.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for inviting me along to speak. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. And thank you to everybody joining us, probably in their lunch hour. I think that's really amazing. Thank you all.